Now, tomorrow there's to be a debate at University College London about egg and sperm donation. In America, it's possible to choose a donor based on height, hair and eye colour, attractiveness and intelligence. You can even choose from a brochure. In this country, some clinics will ask what type of donor you'd like, but on much more limited information. Should it be easier to follow the American example? Well, Professor Marcus Pembrey is a clinical geneticist who chairs the Progress Educational Trust. Olivia Montuschi is one of the founders of the Donor Conception Network. She had 2 donor-conceived children some 30 years ago. Olivia, how often do parents have a kind of wish list of the kind of donor they'd like?
Well, the only wish list they have is to try and match a donor generally with features available in their family. The idea is that the child should be able to fit in their family. Take a family photograph and broadly the colourings and the build and so on are going to be the same. People really do not go into donor conception trying to have a designer list, if you like, of characteristics that they wish for, because after all, donor conception is never a first choice for heterosexual couples and comes after enormous heartache.
So what was your experience 30 years ago?
My experience was that we had no choice whatsoever. Our doctor took a photograph of us and said that he would find a donor that would fit.
And how, as adults, have the kids fitted into your family? Do they look like either of you?
I wish that I had brought a family photograph with me today, because you will see that they very broadly fit. Our son has colouring from my side of the family. Our daughter is fair-haired and blue-eyed, which is pretty similar to my husband, who has no genetic connection to her.
Now, Marcus,
Yes.
How likely is it, if you ask for a tall, blonde Nobel Prize winner, is a child to follow suit?
Well, for those characteristics, very little predictive power is possible. If we take height, it's a very good example. Height is largely genetically determined, and so people think there is some predictive power going from the parents to the children. But in fact, there are hundreds of different gene variants that are involved. And of course, when the child is conceived, or formation of eggs and sperm, you get a shuffling of all these genes. So there's very little predictive power. I can give a concrete example. In 1958, there was a cohort in this country, all children born in the first 1 week of March 1958 have been followed. And if later now we can look back and see what happened to the height, well, across the board, the offspring, the sons and daughters, were on average taller. But if you took the tallest father, there was no son who was as tall as him. They were all shorter. And if you took the shortest father, they were all taller. And for the women, there was only 3 out of 10,000 where the daughter was taller than the mother. So this explains this rule that if you have a large number of factors shuffling all the time, you always get a tendency to cluster back during the population average. So choose a baseball player, who's 6'6" as a donor. You won't get necessarily a very tall son.
You might get a 5'5" son.
Precisely. Yes.
So what sort of characteristics do you find, Marcus, prospective parents are really anxious about?
Well, I think this is important to raise these 2 different points. One is the screening out of serious genetic disease, and the other is what we've talked about, the family, the variation within the normal. Screening out serious genetic diseases is still a problem. We're obliged in this country to take a careful family history, but that doesn't rule out what we call recessive diseases, where both parents are carriers and they can get cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis carrier status is included in the screening in this country, but I think there will be pressure with the increasing genetic technology to do more screening in order to avoid transmission of a serious genetic disease. And I think that's a good thing, even though it raises ethical issues for the donor as to, being obliged to know more about their genotype than they might want.
What really worried you, Olivia, when you were going through this, particularly the potential for a child that had some sort of disease?
Fascinatingly, we were not concerned about that sort of thing. We took assurances from our fertility doctor that the donor would be screened for whatever was possible to screen at that time. And we were so keen to be parents because we felt we had something to offer a child that actually those anxieties were not part of what we thought about at all.
How ethical is it? I mean, Marcus, you mentioned that there are ethical difficulties screening out any kind of disease, but how ethical is it to screen in qualities?
Well, it depends. Firstly, there's the whole ethical thing of screening inequalities. The sort of things that people are thinking about, like height, I've already demonstrated, intelligence, for example, that also is hugely influenced by the developmental experience. And the way I put it is that genes are only one leg of a three-legged stool. You've got the developmental experience, and then you've got other general factors. So just having the genetics, really, you get two legs at the most. You won't stand up.
Olivia, how content would you be with following the US model?
Oh, well, I mean, the US is a highly commercial model where you can have the inside leg measurement, of your sperm donor and so on. I would not wish the UK to go down that road, but I do think that it's important to have a range of information about the donor, largely because it's important that parents feel confident and comfortable about the donor process in general and their donor in particular, in order that they feel confident of talking to their child about it and having that information to give to their child.
Olivia Montuschi and Professor Marcus Pembrey, thank you both very much indeed.